Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our Q&A and discussion for our Tantra course. Just for auspiciousness and to always remember that everything is empty and emptiness is our main intention and purpose of doing Buddhism. Let's just start with reciting the Heart Sutra. Homage to perfection, wisdom, the Blessed Mother. Thus I've heard at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgir, on vast vultures mounted together, great assembly of monks and nuns, a great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also Spirit Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the Great Being, was looking perfectly at the practice of profound perfection wisdom, looking perfectly also at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Then to power Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Spirit Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the Great Being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage the practice of profound perfection wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Spirit Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the Great Being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage the practice of profound perfection wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequent looking perfectly and correctly at also the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is none other than form, form is also none other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, having no characteristics, they are not producing, do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement, no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so forth, up to no mentality element, also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, and no exhaustion of aging and death. And likewise, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness, no attainment, and also no non attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in three times, having relied upon the perfection of wisdom, became manifest, complete Buddhas in state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal to the unequaled mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed Tayata Gata Gata Paragata Parasam Gata Bodhisoha. Shariputra Bodhisattva, great beings, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration, said to Superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, that he'd spoken well. Good, O son of the lineage, is like that, since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, Spirit of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, the entire circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. So thank you. So we'll just take a moment just from our hearts just to generate refuge in bodhicitta. So just for our Q&A and discussion, I want to just be able to go right into the discussion rather than meditate. But we should just in our hearts take refuge in the three jewels, Buddha as our teacher and the example we're emulating of one who's realized emptiness in the full path. The Dharma being, at least from a Lamrim perspective, Dharma jewel, our real source of refuge, which is wisdom realizing emptiness. And the Sangha, which is all of our community's support, in particular Arya Sangha, all those beings, friends, and spiritual examples in our community and history that have realized emptiness directly, and the rest of us trying to do that and helping each other in our practice. And now setting our intention for a class today, being bodhicitta. Whatever we do today, all of our discussion, all of our work here may be put towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May we become Buddha in order that we lead all sentient beings to Buddhahood as well. Okay, so just saying I am recording here from Beijing, China at midnight. So two things, hopefully everything will work with the internet and with Zoom. I had a hard time even getting on. Like I said, everything, the internet's locked down here. I can't use Google, Facebook, Instagram, Gmail, any of these things. So even I couldn't send an email out on Gmail to give you guys the link. I had to resend using data, my Hong Kong eSIM. And anyway, blah, blah, blah. So hopefully everything will be okay with this. And like I said, because it's midnight and I'm jet lagged, I've flown all over the world. I've got my jet lag, terrible asthmatic voice, and I sound like coming down off some bender or something like that. So I apologize in advance. And again, I apologize for my lack of mental acuity. If I have a hard time answering questions or my responses are convoluted. But I'm a big believer, being the sort of anarchist I always have been and guild socialist fan, that we do things as a community. We got sort of a horizontal pool of knowledge here. And I'm not the big head poobah Lama here giving everybody the answer from Mount Sinai, so to speak, but rather we're all practitioners here and all friends and students and teachers and students of one another. So this is sort of going to be a collective effort, collective project today, sharing one another's wisdom and with the people that watch this recording. So there we go, opening it up to questions, comments, discussions, sharing, and so forth. Oh, one last thing, just an apology, as always. I have always these ideas of how a course is going to go, and then when I actually do it, it ends up being completely different. I've wanted to do one live class a month and one discussion class a month. I'll try my best to stick to that. But as always, with my flying schedule changing every month and being everywhere, a lot of times I just have to send out recordings, as you know, which is what I've done. But I do want to keep this up every month to have a discussion, a free open discussion, which what we're doing right now. I really think that that's a huge part of learning. It's not just enough to have these kind of videos, but I think us coming together and sharing, discussing, and having questions will be very, very fruitful. Okay, so finally, I'm done. Any questions, discussions, or even sharing? Mm.
Hey, Matthew. It's Maureen here. I wanted
Yes.
to thank you. I wanted to thank you for suggesting the Lama Yeshe book. I am appreciating so much the directness of his comments, and it's also got me on my bookshelf now. I have this other book, Becoming Vajrasattva.
Mhm.
And it's very helpful because boy, did he ever have a knack for saying, he knew Westerners well. He had a way of being able to say the implicit things that so often don't get stated explicitly about why is this important? What about this? And so I'm appreciating it so much. And also I'm finding it challenging because it's the whole idea of the bliss in my practice and realizing the amount that I shut that down. Uh, so I'm reading his book and just reflecting as I'm doing my practice on the kind of lid that I put on, the kind of compartmentalization and the real kicking up of all of that kind of Judeo-Christian programming that I have that, oh boy, that's really the thing of no, 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 this isn't to feel good. And if it is, you're doing it wrong. This is the kind of stuff that I'm finding in my head. So yes, so far I'm appreciating the book very much. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Wonderful. What's funny, I feel kind of bad in some ways because Lama Yeshe, I think it's because, he was teaching, he didn't live very long. You'd have to go on Wikipedia or on the internet and see, but he died quite young, right? He had like a heart um, failure or something. You died maybe, I think it's around 1984 or so. He'd only been teaching in the West maybe what, like 10, 15 years? Not very long. So, like you say, it's amazing what he accomplished for FPNT and even working with Westerners and transmitting so much in such a short period of time. And with FPMT, because Lama Zopa Rinpoche taught for much longer and had a completely different take because everyone's personality as a teacher is different. And a lot of Lama Yeshe students were, sort of older boomers. They've passed on now. People don't hear about him or talk about him as much. He doesn't have the same, let's say, impact as, let's say, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche did, who was so outrageous and, like such a countercultural hero that everyone talks about him. No one talks so much about Lama Yeshe anymore, and he didn't write very much. Like, there's a few videos of him, and he's got just a few books, and they're just absolutely amazing. And like I say, that's when you look at it. I've got the older copy there. It's from the late '80s or something. It's an old book on Tantra. I mean, there's been so much written since then, but I think it's a masterpiece. It's so easy to read and yet profound, and he just nails it. And it's such a good introduction. And even as more seasoned students can go back and read it and still get a lot out of it. So I mean, that's why I picked it, because people say, oh, that's an old one, and there's been so much since then. Yeah, but it's a good one. Um, Whatever. The Beatles music's old, but it's still good. Like Beethoven's old, but it's still good, right? Like, and yes, this could maybe open up a discussion, but coming from more of a Western tradition, a Judeo-Christian background approaching this, absolutely, we all, as the last 150 years, the masters of suspicion, Freud, Nietzsche, and Marx have shown, we all have, as our Western heritage over the last 2,000 years, um, we've all been structured a certain way culturally because of us growing up in a Christian civilization. The West is a Christian civilization, whether you're Christian or not. Our values, our outlook, our whole paradigm is Christian. Now that that religion isn't as popular, the West is dying. Like, in a sense, it's becoming something else. And that's another discussion. I'm not taking a position on that one way or another. But of course, I always find a big thing for me is always, it's even been in my life, trying to recognize all these unconscious values and concepts, ideas, and structuring I have as a Western person, being born in the late 20th century, going to the 21st, with a Christian background. How is that impacting on my Buddhist practice? How are things getting mixed up? How are things unconsciously being, kind of framed in a certain way that aren't Buddhist, because that's not our culture? And I guess our upbringing is in a Buddhist culture. But one of the big things is, of course, from a Christian point of view, uh, Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of my favorite, maybe my favorite philosopher, he said, coming from sort of a Jewish convert family in Austria-Hungary, he has a great thing. I don't know why we're here, but all I know is we're not here to have a good time. That's like a famous quote. The Jewish hang up, right? But this is the complete opposite idea of what it means to practice Tantra. Tantra is about joy and bliss. And if you're looking at Christianity coming out of St. Augustine, who ends up sort of creating the Christian, St. Paul, um, you look at what Christianity is, the universality of Christianity is created by St. Paul. It's a huge debate in Christianity between St. Peter, who wants to keep Christianity as a Jewish cult, St. Paul, who never even met Christ but had a vision of Christ, wants to universalize it. But St. Paul is the first one to say, hate your body, hate women, hate. I don't want to sort of run them down, but that's a huge way of starting Christianity, with those kinds of personal values. And as the funny quote says, St. Augustine took the worst of St. Paul and made an entire Christian philosophy out of it by unifying Neoplatonism with this. And then John Calvin took the worst of St. Augustine. So you're looking at John Calvin and Luther taking the worst of St. Augustine, creating Protestantism from it. And a lot of us, if we have either a Catholic or Protestant background, we hate the body, we hate women, we hate pleasure, like on an unconscious level. So we have these kinds of hangups when people say, oh, with Tantra, it's about finding bliss, enjoying your body, using these energies. Right away, there's this, uh-oh, like, am I going to go to hell for this? Or is this bad? Is this some elaborate trick to tempt me into something bad? So I totally get it. here I am, like over 30 years of tantric Buddhism, and I still have these hang-ups. Like, when's it going to end? You know what I mean? So, thank you for sharing. Yes, Christine?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that on that. I think it contributes to a lot of that very concept you're talking about. I think it contributes a lot to our conflicts in our community, small and large. You know, whether it's your neighborhood or your city or your country, that overlay of the Christian community. I was not raised as a Christian, but I still get all of that heat, you know, and it's a people are not at all shy about bringing it to you, you know. So yeah, it's a good point. And I want to thank you also for both books. I mean, they're both really informative and great readings. So I had a question about the last time we met, you were talking about basic purity,
Mhm.
and you referenced some of Maitreya's teachings. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that just a little bit. I find myself unfamiliar with the teachings of Maitreya and would like to be more familiar with them.
I'm not number one. That's absolutely. Thank you very much. Great question. But that's gigantic. Like even if I was good at that, and I'm not, that's like, hey, Joyce's Ulysses. Can you sum that up in 2 minutes? Like, or whatever. Or hey, I want to know about the Christian Bible. Let go. It's an absolutely gigantic topic. You've got, and I can't even remember if it's. I think it's again, please correct me, something like 5 books from Maitreya. As you know, Arya Sangha, the two great Buddhist saints predicted by Buddha, that Buddha said, well, whatever, 500 years from now, after I die or whatever, you're going to have these two famous saints that come and reestablish Buddhism, in particular the Mahayana doctrine, Arya Nagarjuna being the first one, and Arya Sangha. So Arya Sangha famously got these texts from Tashita Pure Land. He kind of astrally traveled, went into trance or whatever, went to Sheeta Pure Land, and then, as they always said, over the course of a morning, Buddha Maitreya dictated, kind of like psychically, or gave him these transmissions of these texts. And then when he kind of came out of trance, 50 years had gone past here on Earth. It's kind of wacky, something like that. Anyway, kind of cool. So you have all these, like the Mahayana Tantra Shastra and Clear Ornament Realization, these kinds of books that are sourced to Maitreya, and a lot of them, of course, on Buddha nature or mind only. A Sangha's commentary on that mind only school of emptiness, and these are things that you study when you're getting your Geshe degree, or in other traditions, Kagyuningma, your Kempo degree. And to be honest, the interpretations of these texts vary a lot. Like what Buddha nature means for a Gelugpa practitioner is very different than what it means from a Nyingma practitioner, right? The understanding of emptiness, as we've talked about in previous courses, between emptiness of self and emptiness of others, varies a lot. In the same way as you can, look at the difference between, let's say, theology from a Catholic or a Protestant standpoint. Protestantism, there's so much variation in that compared to, let's say, if you're Calvinist or Lutheran, for instance, or Anglican. It's a similar kind of thing. I can, send you an email. Like there's Geshe Loden has a great book. Rinpoche translated for him in Australia. He wrote a book called, I think it's called Fundamental Potential for Enlightenment. I think it's called, from Tashita Press. I don't think it's cheap, but from Australia, you probably get a copy online. It's a very good commentary on the Mahayana Tantra Shastra on Buddha nature from a Gelugpa point of view. You can also get Zazen Rinpoche's. He did 2 years of commentary on that text back in the late 1980s. That should be on his website, zazentoku.com. We listened and studied that together as a community in Zerling about 20 years ago. It's fabulous stuff. Maitreya, a huge part of that is he's teaching what does it mean to be a Buddha? Like, what is a Buddha? And what's funny is when you, like the Mahayana Tantra Shastra gives all these examples of Buddha nature and what a Buddha is, all the different powers and qualities. I actually think it's important to learn all this because you were trying to be a Buddha and you don't even know what it is. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, where are you going? Oh, I'm going whatever. I'm going to Algeria for a visit. Oh, what I've done no research on. I don't know if I need the right permit or passport to get in. It's kind of like, why would you go on a trip without doing no research? We have to know what a Buddha is if we're trying to be that way. And like when you look at the 32 major and minor, like the, what is it, 80 minor marks or whatever, I can't remember, of a Buddha, I always joke that a Buddha is like an alien, right? Like an angel, and they're non-human. It's kind of interesting. So it's interesting to study all that. They're like a being, like an angel made out of light or energy in a complete symbolic form. So they're not like a flesh and blood being like we are. And you learn all that by studying the Buddha nature teachings, but it's extremely, extremely profound. So anyway, I just, good luck in your research and study about that, Christine, because I think it's wonderful. And like I say, if you could look for a, like, let's say Geshe Loden's book, thank you, Natasha, for the link there, or Rinpoche's course, that's a great place to start. Great. Natasha?
Yes, thank you, Matthew, for all that you have given us so far. I have only been able to listen to 2 of the 3 recordings.
No worries. No worries.
So I'm not sure if my question, if you touch on it. I want to go back to something Maureen talked about. This idea of the difficulty getting into some of this, of the notion of bliss. And you're talking about Western hangups and so on. And as you know, when I was at in Nelson in retreat, I've talked to Christina quite a bit about the 5 Buddha families, and she pointed me in the direction of a few texts, and that seems to be something I've been trying to learn more about. And it feels to me that the emphasis on bliss is is like one of those kleshas, right? It's one of those 5, right? So it's a big one. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to understand the emphasis on bliss as a path toward enlightenment from the point of view of, let's say, the Padma family, right? It's like where your hang up is about addiction, it's about clinging, it's about desire that has gone awry, right? And so this path, it's potentializing that and transforming it into, like, you talk about the transformation, right? The alchemy into something great. But what if your hang up is the opposite? It's aversion, right? And I know, like, some people would have wrathful practices, right, to deal with that aspect. And what if your hang up is fear? And what if your hang up is fear for others? So it's wrapped in compassion. It's wrapped in, like, we're talking about, as you're pointing out, a very masculinist Christian tradition, right? So women are put down. But a lot of us here who identify as women perhaps could relate that we are constantly thinking of others in our lives, right? So it's not, the compassion is alien to us as a concept, and we're so narcissistic and hung up on our pleasure, right? It's, the klesha is more like, oh, my child is gonna, go out in the street and gonna die. What am I gonna do? Like, so paranoia and kind of like a different, completely different landscape. So how does Tantra translate in that scenario, I guess, in terms of the energy that is being transformed, right? We're talking about love, this desire, love how about that kind of energy?
That's a great question. Maybe deeper, more. Yeah, I don't know if we won't exhaust it just in a short little class like this. There's a bunch of different, I guess, kind of levels to that question, obviously. And so, first thing, yeah, like in terms of bliss and joy, yeah, you sort of hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways. It's, Tantra is about sort of developing a different attitude or a relationship to bliss and joy and happiness, not an addictive one, like what we've said. So you listen to all these podcasts with Gabor Mate or everybody know how addiction works. And like I said, that's like, I don't want to run the Semitic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam down too much because they have mystical lineages with them. They have more sort of feminist readings. I mean, I don't want to sort of have a cartoon view of those religions because they're very, very rich religions and have all sorts of magical, mystical things that are wonderful about them too, right? But like I said, that sort of addictive desire, which at least from certain Christian readings, that's what original sin is, for instance, right? So we know that samsara runs on that kind of view of lack and addiction. So I, sort of said this in one of the recordings that I did. So Tantra is about introducing a lot of ways joy or bliss, which is something, let's say, very, very different, right? Now, of course, Tantra, what you'll see when we get into it, yeah, rather than using a repressive um, methodology, more from, like, let's say, a sutric point of view, or worse, where you're just trying to go cold turkey with these things, we're going to use those things, the energy of those things, to actually transmute them alchemically, right? So that's the different thing. So, but there's all different delusions. Tantra will purify. So, of course, desire is just one of them. Like you said, anger is another one. Ignorance is another one. Like they always say, like you've got the three root delusions, right? Which is ignorance. Everything comes out of that. Attachment and anger. So represented at the center of the wheel of life by the pig, the snake, and then the pigeon or rooster, right? There's a famous quote in Nietzsche's Nachlass where he says, pig, snake, rooster, I am all of these. Like it's a great line. So that's from a samsaric point of view, we're all those things. So Tantra has a way of purifying each of those things. So there are deities that work just with desire and attachment. Of course, we can see in his example something like Ruka and Vajragini. There are deities that work just with aversion or anger, Yamantaka, Hayagriva, Vajrakalaya, and so forth. And then all of them, in a lot of ways, you could say work because the whole point is they're about you uh, cutting through delusion and realizing emptiness. That's the whole point of Tantra. So all of them work on ignorance, but we could also say that some of them in particular work on ignorance a little bit better, right? Like Goy Samaja works on anger and hatred too, but in a lot of ways, the sort of father tantras, something like that, because they're so detailed and the focus is on clear appearance, they work on your ignorant mind. So the ignorant mind can be just a spaced out mind that you have, or an overly judgmental mind. There's different ways that sort of delusion of ignorance comes about. So that will, all of those things will be purified with Tantra. Am I leaving any? You said a lot, Natasha. Sorry, I'm a little jet lagged here. What else?
No, thank you, thank you. I guess the emptiness of the deity too, I think is helping. Like what I'm hearing too in the background is this idea that it will purify no matter what it is that you're bringing, right? So, and then the secondary delusions are, jealousy or envy or, arrogance and so on. So, and the colors always speak to me, right? If you're gonna work with a certain date that is a certain color, and I like how Lama Yeshe talks about color and the importance of color. It really brought back to me, right, the specificity of that deity. So that could be a source of a guide for aligning with a deity that is going to help you with that particular delusion. But in the end, they all work towards eliminating ignorance. So thank you for that. Can I ask a follow-up question that is not directly related, but it's more about the path of Tantra. And so we've studied Sutra for so long, Lam Rim, and you need that background to jump into this kind of thing. And so if you don't realize emptiness, you can't quite do Tantra because you don't, it's like a dress rehearsal, right? You're putting on these things, right? But at the same time, Tantra flips Sutra on its head, and it's like, this is the path. Like, you don't have to have that figured out. You're going to figure it out through Tantra, right? So I get a little confused sometimes with the chicken and the egg problem. And I'm a little, literal that way. So if you haven't realized emptiness, how can you take on Tantra in that sense? And
Well, if I
and
can interrupt, and I don't want to make you
yeah,
look like
yeah,
an idiot, specifically in a public context here, but the whole point is that this is a methodology for you to realize emptiness. Like, there's all these warning things of, oh, because you're working with the energy of your delusions rather than trying to cut them off or repress them, it's very dangerous because it might make them worse, right? So if I'm working with sex or anger or ignorance, rather than becoming a wise, compassionate, spiritual person, I'll become even worse than a worldly person. I'll become like a magical, superpower, godlike, worldly ego person, like obsessed with sex or angry all the time and fighting with people magically, and you're just like this evil wizard running around causing problems. And how would that make the world a better place, right? So a lot of the warning labels, like you watch American TV and all it is medication commercials, right? And I always love, oh, you're having problems with this, try this. And so, and then it says, side effects include, and then it's 30 seconds of the most horrible side effects of this pharmaceutical thing. You always get that where they give you all these warning labels about Tantra and make you think that you have to have realized emptiness already and be this super high practitioner before you even start, right? Which is sometimes kind of unfair, because the whole point is this is the path for you to get that way. They just want to stress how difficult it is and how careful you have to be when you do. You have to have so much wisdom and skill. But all Tantra is a path to realizing emptiness. That's it. It's just good old fashioned Buddhism. It's just more quick and more powerful. And the point of the Gelugpa traditions to see the unity of Sutra and Tantra is that they actually dovetail. Once you study karma and emptiness to know how vows work, and that basically your habits create your mind, right? Your reality is your morality, so to speak. The kinder, better, more compassionate, wiser you are, the more your life will become clearer, more beautiful, and blissful on its own. And this is the entry right into Tantra. All Tantra is by working with clear appearance, right? And Vajra pride. In other words, pure conception, pure appearance. It's easier for you to keep your vows. It's easier for you to express yourself as a Buddhist, which brings about the whole process quicker, right? And then once they let the cat out of the bag, we get into completion stage. And the point is that bliss, the lower tantras lead into that. But that bliss, you're practicing bliss by always kind of like remembering and practicing joy and bliss in your life and enjoying that, and with bodhicitta and offering that up to the Buddhas. But the point is when all your chi or winds go into the central channel and remain and absorb, the bliss you get for that, it's a positive mental. I mean, even when you're meditating regularly with a conceptual mind for tranquil abiding, one of the virtuous secondary minds or mental factors is called physical suppleness, right? So the more you're going up to getting shamatha, right, or pure concentration, there is this subtle chi or prana in your body that becomes purified and dominant. So even just meditating makes you feel blissful, right? Which is why there's actually 2 bodhisattva vows that say, don't just do this for this bliss, right? And don't get blissed out on this bliss. The whole point is you're doing this to realize emptiness, to help people, not sit there, oh my God, like, wow, man, like, and there's people that do this, obviously. People say that that's the whole point. It's just like taking drugs. It's just like, wow, but that's not the point. But that's that subtle, like, bliss of physical suppleness that automatically happens when you're meditating, just like it happens when you practice yoga or qigong. When you do yoga, at the end, when you jog, at the end of your jogging and you show up back home 5 in the morning, get ready to work, and you're like, and the sun's coming up, there's all this vitality or positive chi in your body. But imagine just by doing pranayama yoga, you feel that's the whole point. That's just to open up and get that chi so you can meditate and do Raja Yoga, right? Just meditating. This is why when you get that level of tranquil by the 9th level and you have total concentration, you're not distracted, it's incredibly blissful. This is on a sutric level. This is with a conceptual mind. It's amazing, right? Like, obviously, when you get to that tranquil binding, it's not a conceptual mind. As you know, you end up having the mind of a form realm God. It's a non-conceptual mind. But the point, the lead up to all that is conceptual. This is sutra, it's not tantra, right? That's blissful. And so they say that many times when you read the sutras and stuff, Buddha has to meet with these meditators who are stuck in that kind of bliss and kind of wake them up, because they're just like, like somehow they've got stuck in that bliss. And then he's like, nope, do this, and then realize then is being, and they get it right away. Okay, so that's sutric bliss. Completion stage tantra of Anuttara Yoga, the top level of Tantra, the bliss of all your winds in your central channel is way more powerful than that, way more blissful. And why is that important? You will never be distracted with that mind. One, because there's no conceptual minds, because the chi or winds that support them have all dissolved. So it's just this very subtle mind of clear light, Rigpa, whatever you want to call it, non-conceptual, super powerful, that can realize emptiness or its empty nature very, very quickly, right? Which is why you can get enlightened in this life. But also that bliss, even an addicted mind would say, you would want nothing else. You would never be distracted because nothing would ever be as good as that, right? Like my teacher and friend David Gonzalez said, why do they use, and again, maybe some people's chocolate cake, I shouldn't say, but why do we use sexual metaphors for Tantra? Because if you have amazing sex, you're never distracted. If you have bad sex, then yeah, oh my God, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go to work. But without being too vulgar, if you're having amazing sex, would you be anywhere else? Are you fantasizing, oh, hey, I could be playing golf or on the beach in Cancun? No, you're exactly in that space. So just take that mind and meditate on emptiness. Does that sound okay? Or, yeah, okay. Claude, you're muted.
Back, back to the Christian tradition, which is still very strong with me, a feeling of shame that's really overwhelming. Well, I would like to know the answer of Tantra to that. What I tend to do is sort of take this shame and pour it into the Dakini skull cup, and through Om, Ah, Hum, having it transformed. Is that a good idea?
That's
And
a
please
great idea.
give me others.
That's a great idea. I mean, one of the big things I always just try and tell people is just change the channel. Like when people say I have tons of guilt, we do culturally, but the point is guilt doesn't exist in Buddhism because it's a Semitic value, right? So when we look at guilt, it's like a court of law. You've broken a rule. There is a judge and jury, and you're being judged on it. This is the Semitic view from Jews, Christians, and Muslims. God is the judge. He's given you the rules. The policemen are the judge. Yes, sir. And then, oh no, I jaywalked, I stole, whatever, I didn't pay my taxes. Then you're in court and you have to plead your case. You know, the angels are whatever, your defense lawyer, and all the other angels are the district attorneys trying to nail you. And you are judged accordingly, the great judge. And that's why you feel guilty. And from a Christian point of view, not for Muslims and Jews, but for Christians, there's original sin. You are born guilty, right? Hence, need to be redeemed, right? I need to be saved, right? That's the idea of the scapegoat, of Christ being sacrificed to pay for my sins, pay off the karma for my guilt. Whether you want to believe that or not, that's fine. But the point is, none of that exists in Buddhism. So the problem is, like with us coming to that, it's like little kids who draw a picture on the wall and get scared of it, right? Like this isn't in. This is why you might have heard the stories of the 1970s, where as long as the Dalai Lama, people come up, Western people, and say, "I'm crippled by self-hatred. I hate myself so much," and be like, what do I translate this and stuff? And he just didn't get it. Like, what do you mean you hate yourself? Why do you hate yourself? And the point is, he was missing that whole conceptual map where it's like, yeah, you're meant to hate yourself because you're guilty. You've sinned. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. Like in Buddhism, you don't have to worry about that because that doesn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean that just goes away because we've been culturally structured that way, but we have all these hangups. Maybe less and less now as we're in a quote unquote post-Christian society in the West. But certainly people my age and older, we grew up with all of that, where you should feel guilty about being happy, guilty about having pleasure, guilty about having bliss, because this is the whole cartoon Neoplatonism, is that the body is matter. Matter is dark. Matter is sinful. Matter is dualism. Matter is duality. Matter is this earth, whereas the soul, the mind, the nous, leading to the one. This is sort of an Augustinian standpoint, or heaven. It's separate. So whatever pulls me into the body is bad, and evil is a privation, a darkness, a deep matter, a low vibe. Whatever gets me out of that brings me closer to God, right? Does not exist in Buddhism. No, it's a completely different conceptual map. So that's what I tell you. But I think just doing what you do, where you're doing the alchemical visualizations, will help transform these ideas, these energies, these assumptions in your mind, right? So that's what I would say.
Matthew.
Hi, Matthew. Oh, go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Matthew, I don't have any questions. I find that you're just always answering the questions I didn't even know I had. And that's what makes partly your teaching so enjoyable. I think a long time ago, I first ran across a reference to bliss, and it just exploded something in my brain. And I didn't really know what I was dealing with, but it's just been there ever since. And once I ran into what we do here, and hearing it from Rinpoche and from wonderful teachers like you, it's just been filling me up slowly over the years. And I just find it's it's it that feeling of joyfulness is always there now. But I'm not being distracted from. I know that I need to practice more meditation, and doing that together. But I just find that this kind of teaching and understanding is a blissful experience in itself. And I, yeah, I guess that's all I'm saying is my appreciation for what you teach and how you teach it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very sweet. Appreciate it. So, Elena, were you going to say something? Yeah.
Y- Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for your wonderful teaching and for setting up this Q&A session. I have a question about anger. So you spoke about like how we use desire in Tantra. Are we working in the same way with anger, and we using the power of anger in the same way? And also, just a small question: did you make a distinction between anger and being over judgmental? I always thought it's kind of the same way, or the same thing. So we're judgmental because we're angry inside. Is it a different thing in your opinion?
That's a good point. Yes. Pardon me. Sorry. Yeah, being judgmental, I guess what I meant is the idea of believing that our judgments are somehow independent of our act of judging, which is what we all do. Like our judgmental mind's funny because we all know we're judgmental. We all know our judgments are from us and relative, right? And yet in our day-to-day lives, we never think that, right? It's like a disavowed belief. Like, we see that in other people. Well, if someone's being so judgmental, but the point is we, like I say, it is like a disavowed belief because, we take our judgments so seriously. So that's the point of the ignorance, is that we're always making judgments, and we always forget that our judgments are just our judgments coming from us, just like our opinions are, right? We always say, oh, that's just my opinion. But even when we say that, deep down, we mean that our opinion has more weight than anyone else's, is closer to the truth, right? That it's kind of funny that way. But then there's just being mean and judgmental, where, as you can say, it's a form of passive aggressivity, let's say, or even outright hostility when we're being judgmental to people, behind their backs or right to their face. So yes, I mean, that's a huge part of, usually, at the end of the game, samsara, why we're stuck in samsara, is because of our attachment. And so attachment, in a lot of ways, of course, because it's a form of attachment to ourselves, our self-cherishing mind, based on our self-grasping mind, thinking things exist independent of our minds, like outside of any kind of relationship and so forth. That attachment and desire on this fundamental level are the main things we're trying to sort of purify or cut through with Tantra. But in a sort of more coarse sense, people have, like I said, different kinds of personalities. We all have attachment, anger, and ignorance in us. But Tantra likes to sort of slot in where it's like some people are very desirous, just like some people, without being too vulgar, are really, really horny people or whatever, like are just very addictive, like addictive personalities, like, oh my God, I can't stop eating bags of potato chips, or, this thing, or you're addicted to sex or addicted to all sorts of things. And then you see some people, we sort of laugh, like, the people that are sort of more attached and addictive, they're all people doing, like, let's say, Vajrayogini and Haruka or whatever, Havajra. Then we always sort of joke, like in Sangha Friends, the people working on anger are all the Yamataka or Hayagriva people. They gravitate to this because they have so much anger in them. And anger, of course, so much of it's just from being hurt, right? It's sort of a deep form of reactivity. So, like, a friend of mine will only practice wrathful deities. And I've said, oh, I'm not interested. Like, just like, what about Green Tara? Forget it. Like, and just because this person's really working on their anger. And it's like, okay, I get it. That's cool, right? And then other people you meet, like I said, are just checked out or spaced out. So sometimes you think people like that should do more almost like complicated Tantra, to sort of put them in the present moment where they're fixating and paying attention, being mindful, doing the details. Like Goya Samaja, where it's like you generate this huge mandala, then you dissolve it, then you generate another mandala, then you dissolve it. Like it's just that kind of thing. Or like Kalachakra, where you have all those different deities, and oh my God, they all represent different celestial bodies and inner winds. You're thinking, oh, that's so complicated. Yeah, it's perfect for people that are just like zombies, that just don't care. They've just checked out of their lives. It's like, no, your teacher says do this. It's like, now I have to be present and be here now, right? So you can see it's like different tantric personalities, right? So anger is a big one. And we all have anger. Like you see, anger, I sort of joke that in Western Buddhism, uh, like for a long time, because of this whole Christian, even Victorian hang up, at least in more Anglo-Saxon spheres, the big taboo was sex. So if you're a Buddhist practitioner and you're like, every time I sit down, I can't stop fantasizing about sex, everyone's like, got more work to do. Like it's this huge taboo you were ashamed of. But I felt that because our culture has changed so much around that, where sex is all good and the more sex you have, the better. If you admit that you have sex, everyone's like, well, hey, I spent the whole session thinking about sex too. You and me, huh? We're the same thing. The taboo now is being angry, because that's seen as a moral fault now. So if it's just like, oh, Matthew, everyone's together, how was your meditation? Oh man, like I'm angry. I just felt like killing all of you. We're feel unsafe around you. You shouldn't come back to the temple anymore. And it's just kind of like that scene is somehow, how come this guy can't get over his anger issues, dude? Whereas really anger, we all have it, and it's very hard to get rid of, because for the most part the anger we have is justified. We might come from horrible childhoods or horrible experiences we have, and it's a reaction to those things. A friend of mine, she's a Buddhist teacher and chaplain. She goes to all these Buddhist teacher conferences. Very good. I could never go to something like that. Anyway, I have my own judgmental mind. I would probably just get into fights with everybody. But she said they had this roundtable. It was with some very important Western teachers. And she said that. She's like, I'm having a hard time when we're meditating. It's mostly all Theravada people there. I'm very angry. And she's had like a very difficult life. And all the teachers were like, well, come back to the present moment and your breath. Someone like you shouldn't be angry. So remember, and I said, you know what? I would have stand up and punched them. Like I would have got, my anger was like, I would have gotten thrown out of that conference as the failed Buddhist teacher, because it's so fake. We all have that in us. Please don't, put on public display you're a complete idiot and pretend we don't have these things within us. Just like we can have sexual desire, any of these things, we have anger. And sometimes it's right to be angry. You look at the world with all the wickedness and injustice and you get angry. You look at your childhood, speaking from a person who came from a very dysfunctional, traumatic childhood, and you're angry at it. Why did that happen to me? That's not fair. That wasn't right. It's normal to have those things. So Tantra, rather than just pretending that's not there or trying to cut that off in a real coarse way, they're like, oh, let's transform this. Let's arise as a Buddha who's super angry. Like, you think I'm angry? What about this guy who's really angry? Like, I always laugh how you've got semi-wrathful, right? Like Haruka. Then you go to like wrathful, which is Yamantaka. Then you go like, you keep dialing it till it goes off the edge, which is what they call extremely wrathful deities, like Hayagriva and Vajrakalaya, right? That are considered so angry they've kind of rolled the score on the anger, because it's just like they're about. And it's interesting because those deities are used for exorcism in Tibet, evil spirits, drug addiction, sexual abuse, because it's like doing the peaceful medicine Buddhist stuff, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You have to like dial it up to 10 or 11 or 12 or 15 to get rid of that negative energy. Someone's angry because they've been sexually abused. You don't say, okay, now Green Tara comes and shoots this sweet rainbow energy. No one's going to believe that. Like that's not going to work. You have to have something super, super wrathful and intense, right? So Does that help or?
Thank you. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you so much for these comments. It's very
Yeah, no
helpful.
worries.
Thank you. Makes sense.
So anything else? I just don't want to keep it's about an hour now, and we'll do this again. So yeah, Sharon.
I just want to say thank you to you and to everybody. And I just think, wow, for all of us to be here now at the moment is great. So I know you don't have much time, but wonderful to read Lama Yeshe again. Actually, he was sort of my first introduction. But what stands out, I guess, actually, I listened to your teachings again this morning, like the early hours, because I thought, well, got to get some good questions. But what I want to say is I know that people who really have suffered a lot, like almost died and lived in that, they come out with this beautiful sense of love. And that's sort of what I wanted to say. I think it's all about love. I mean, we're talking about enlightenment, but when you truly love from your heart, that is it, I think. And that's like in all religions. And so yeah, I did a long time with sutra and was kind of thinking, well, I don't think I can ever get to that completion stage. But no, that's where it seems to be going. But for me, I look at it more psychologically and as like archetypes, which is what you have brought up, really. Anyway, mostly just thank you to everybody because I'm learning, and I know I don't express it that well, but I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Very poetic and a beautiful expression. So awesome. And I'll just add to that saying that once you switch, it's kind of like Natasha, you might get a little bit with Lacanian psychoanalysis, but once you traverse the fantasy, desire as a lack pulls itself inside out and becomes a fullness. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but once we go from a lack addictive mind over to this bliss or joy, for the first time you're full, and so you can share that open heart, not a lack. And ironically, the lack is emptiness that makes you a fullness. Isn't that funny? There's all sorts of paradoxes that way. It's because I've been putting something that isn't there in the first place, inherent existence. It's made me an addict and a lack. Once I realize emptiness, which is the lack of something I put there that was never there to begin with, this lack of me that's an addict becomes a fullness. Now that I'm a fullness, I can share that love and compassion with everybody without exception, which is what bodhicitta was all about right from the beginning, right? Which is why bodhicitta is about realizing emptiness and love and compassion at the same time. So it's an emptiness and a fullness, right? So Sartre would say, great thing, consciousness is neither empty nor full. We could say that it's the same thing here with the tantric path. The whole point is love. And that's what I like when Nietzsche says, first you start as the camel, weighed down by all the resentment and everything and values. Then you become the lion, which is your like transformative alchemical Lojong thing, transforming everything, but the end point of affirming eternal return of the same, which means I love everything without exception so much I would never change a thing, is you become the child. You become the baby, the innocent baby who loves everybody and everything, right? That's kind of the end point here. Becoming the Buddha, when you have that kind of absolute innocent love towards all things. And you might think, okay, that sounds great intellectually, but the point is if you practice Tantra, even if you're starting with Kriya Tantra, but especially if you go to Anuttara Yoga and you get completion stage realizations and you have great bliss, spontaneous born exalted wisdom, where the winds are dissolving in the central channel, that bliss and love and happiness is indestructible. So I never got a chance to meet him. I only saw him in the audience, but he was famous Gelugpa Lama, Reba Rinpoche. You might have heard about him. So Holiness Reba Rinpoche was one of Pabanka Rinpoche's students. And he was teaching a little bit in the 90s or so when he came to North America. So my teacher, David Gonzalez, received a bunch of teachings for him. And he was in a wheelchair because during the Cultural Revolution, when he was in jail, the guards would break his legs over and over and over again, right? They broke his legs, I don't know how many times. So he was crippled, right? They keep asking all these dumb political questions. And anyway, so he's in a wheelchair. So when I saw him at the Dalai Lama's talk, whatever, I can't remember when, he was in a wheelchair as this old Tibetan monk in a wheelchair. But the whole point is he was doing Haruka self-initiation in jail every single day by heart, memorized it. And so, like, he said he had nothing but bliss. He's the one where he was like, I almost got mad once. So the point is that's not an intellectual belief. It was a physical experience he had from his tantric practice, right? When you think about it, what's worse than being tortured every day of your life when you're in jail for 20 years? Not much else. But the point is, his tantric realizations of this bliss were energetically so powerful. He had nothing but love and compassion for everybody, including the people doing that to him every day. And that's amazing. Isn't that amazing? So thank you, Sharon, for bringing that up. And that's what it's all about. And Tantra will allow you to do that. It's very, very special. We're so fortunate to have, the opportunity to practice that. Okay, so that's 10 minutes after 9 your time. So how about we call it a day and dedicate this. So we'll have another question and answer at the first Saturday of, I'm going into retreat for about a month, but I'll do some recordings the next little bit on my sessions where I'm not teaching, I'm not practicing, so to speak, like in my breaks. And we'll have another question and answer and stuff as we go through Lama Yeshe's book. So let's just take a moment to dedicate it.
Matthew, I just last question. Where should we be up to with Lama Yeshe at this point in time? What chapter generally?
Good question. You know what? I don't have my book on me.
Okay.
I think it's on transforming appearances is the
Yes.
next. Okay. That's
Thank
the
you.
next where I start. I'll try and get through that next little session. Like I'm trying to do a recording for every sort of block or whatever, like almost thematically what he's talked about that chapter. But that's the next recording will be on that one. Okay, so blessings of all holy beings, the truth of karma, power of pure spirit intention, and all of our dharma wishes be fulfilled. Okay, thank you. Let me just stop recording.